Perfect. Yep, we got it.
Thanks.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. So here's the agenda. I would like to first introduce myself and introduce Foreship. I know Warren covered that a little bit, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. I do want to take a opportunity to plug our internship that we have this summer that we're planning. Tell you a little bit about the state of the industry from our perspective, because what we primarily do here in the US is in the cruise industry. And so that's taken, obviously, it's been significantly impacted by COVID. So I want to share with you a little bit about what's going on and kind of what we're looking at down the road and in the future for us. Then we'll focus mainly on those 8 things that I wish I learned as an intern, and then we'll leave some time at the end for open discussion. Okay, so who am I? Warren mentioned I graduated from the name department in 2013. Right now I'm president of US operations for Foreship LLC. This is a timeline of my, let's say, internships and jobs that I've had. So Warren mentioned the internships that I had starting in 2009. I graduated in 2013. I initially went to go work for a company called Granhern, which I don't think they exist as such anymore. But it's a subsidiary of KBR. In 2015, I came to Foreship as a project manager. In 2018, I went to Jared Parmarine as engineering manager, and then this year I came back to Foreship. And most importantly on this slide is my wonderful family in the top right-hand corner. It's my wife, Nyada, and my little boy, Lucas, who's about to turn 2 years old. So this is a little summary of Foreship here. We have 80 full-time employees around the world. We have offices in the US in Fort Lauderdale and Seattle, like Warren mentioned, but we also have offices, let's say 4 in Finland, 1 in Estonia, and we actually have an office in Hamburg, Germany as well, that just opened recently and not shown here. So here's my plug for our internship. What we're looking for the internship is somebody who's interested in stability and ship structures. We have a very strong stability department in Finland, and stability, especially now, is one of those things that whether there's a pandemic or whether there's passengers on board or not, every 3 to 5 years, the ship stability needs to be reassessed. And especially on cruise ships, they're changing all the time. So one of the things I wanted to highlight on this slide that I found quite interesting as I've spent time in Foreship is the bottom right-hand corner, right? Adding 1,000 mattresses can add 50 tons to a vessel. So we did a project a couple of years ago where they were upgrading the mattresses, and there were going to be this new heavyweight, super fancy mattresses, right, for a cruise ship. And they had no clue the impact that it was going to have on the stability. The ship had very small margins to begin with. And so believe it or not, the mattresses were impacting the ship's stability enough that they had to make some other changes to compensate. Another funny one is how much paint can weigh over the time of a lifespan of a ship if they don't actually remove it and just continue to paint over. So especially in the cruise industry, stability is always, let's say, a hot topic, because these ships are kind of like fat old ladies. They just keep gaining weight and gaining weight and gaining weight over their lifespan. So the internship will be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A remote option is available, but understanding the circumstances and who knows where we'll be in the summertime, right? But if at all possible, we would really prefer the person to be here so that we can, let's say, have that team building experience in person. So Warren is actively gathering resumes. If you're interested, please shoot that over to him. So here's a little current state of the industry. I'll try to move through this quickly so we can get to the meat of the presentation. But as you can imagine, COVID's had a devastating impact on the cruise industry. A lot of people lost their jobs, and the economic impact has been huge, right? But it's not all doom and gloom, especially now. We've seen, especially in February, activity starting to pick up. I think a lot of the good news with the vaccine, the change in administration, and now that we're just kind of past the holiday season, I think a lot of people are starting to, the companies are starting to open up their pocketbooks a little bit more and take some action on their cruise ships. So some of the things that will have to get done are, for example, the Americans Disabilities Act. We're seeing that a lot of cruise lines are taking the opportunities with their ships, let's say downtime, to make modifications to bring their ships into compliance with the Americans Disabilities Act. Most of the cruise ships, if not all of the ones that we deal with, were built in Europe. So you can imagine that the Americans Disabilities Act was not exactly a priority for the European shipbuilders when they built their ships. So most of these ships are not in compliance. And in order to sail in the US waters, you need to be compliant with ADA. Another thing that we've been helping out with and we're seeing is the, let's say, upgrade of medical centers on board cruise ships. And the cruise companies need help with this, as far as finding the space, generating layouts, making sure that any changes that they're making are in compliance with SOLAS and standard ship rules and regulations. Especially with the new administration and their focus on the environment and let's say green technologies, electrification of vessels, if we call it that, has become a very hot and popular topic. So this article was BC Ferries is in Vancouver, Canada, and they announced a $1 billion with a B dollar project for a new fleet of electric ferries. We're seeing that even some of the older ships are looking to maybe even convert to hybrid fuel or some sort of use of batteries to comply with rules and regulations along the coasts of various countries. So this is a new and very exciting opportunity for us. And kind of along the lines of that, Port Miami just announced that they're going to supply shore power for the vessels, so they don't need to keep their diesel generators on when they're in port. They can use electric power and reduce carbon emissions while near cities. So these are all things that are very exciting. They're things that the cruise lines are taking advantage of now with a lot of their ships, let's say, laid up or out of service because they're not able to take on passengers, and they're starting to make these modifications. And finally, I had to put this one on here too, because this is your very own Professor Collette, indicating that with the new administration's support of the Jones Act, offshore wind farms and the implications of US built and ships and US provided labor is going to be a huge opportunity. And this is very early on, right? Europe is kind of a couple steps ahead of us in this, but the US has a lot of catching up to do in this world. And it's going to be a huge opportunity for a lot of naval architecture and engineering companies. But this discussion is about you guys. So let's refocus that one and get to these 8 things that I wish I learned as an intern. So here's what we're going to talk about. I'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. And please stop me as we're going through if you have any questions or any comments you'd like to add. So first things first. I think the internship program is a great opportunity to explore different work environments. So as a naval architect and a marine engineer, you can go work in a shipyard, which is very different than working in a tow tank or a research center, right? Which is very different than working in a corporate office, which is very different than staying in, let's say, the education system and maybe becoming a professor, something like this. So my recommendation to you is try to do internships in all various types of work environments and figure out which one you like better, because you may be surprised. Something else that's especially now worth considering is the discussion around hybrid workplaces with COVID. So talking to some of the other, let's say, business leaders and other companies, a lot of folks are considering hybrid workplaces, meaning maybe you come in 3 times a week and you can work remotely 2 days a week. A lot of places are going full remote and not being in the office at all. For us, it's a little bit of this is not new for us because we're always working globally and we're always working on dry docks and we're traveling quite a bit. The whole remote work capability is something that we've been doing since before I started with Foreship back in 2015. So this is kind of normal for us. I personally believe there's a lot of value to working in an office with people, getting to see people. And I know that now this hybrid workplace is popular, but I fully expect that people are going to sway back to wanting to be in the office with each other because, as y'all probably know, doing your classes online, it's efficient and gets the job done, but it's not the same as being in person. So this is something that I'd encourage you to think about as you're looking for internship opportunities. A recent study suggested that 87% of people think that this new hybrid way of working is more effective and an improvement. I found that to be the case initially at my last position because let's say the engineering department was on one side of the building, and anytime I needed to go to the restroom or get some coffee or something like that, everybody stopped me for everything that they needed, right? So my 15-minute water break would turn into a 2-hour discussion about something that really wasn't exactly my priority as the engineering manager. So in that sense, there are some benefits to this remote working, but my recommendation, honestly, is if you're going to work for your first full-time job or an internship, I would really recommend finding a place that you can get in person. And granted that the let's say situation allows for that whenever that time does come. But as a young engineer, I think it's really critical to find like an in-person mentoring opportunity. And I just see that being a little bit of a challenge to achieve remotely. When you're young in your career, I say you need to be a sponge and soak up as much as possible. I think that's better done in person. Okay, number 2, maintain the relationships you develop during your internships. Warren and I were chatting about this before, especially in our industry, the world is so small. And I have a funny story actually that in one of my internships at Gibbs & Cox, I worked very closely with this gentleman named Mike. And I think the story goes, my email, because my name is Benjamin, they abbreviated my email and it said Ben Jam Sward at Gibbs & Cox, something like this. So somehow my nickname ended up as Ben Jam at Gibbs & Cox the whole time I was there. So fast forward 5 years, 6 years later, I'm on a dry dock in the Bahamas, right? No air conditioning, 90 degrees outside, pretty miserable, sweating. And I'm getting in the elevator and I hear, "Hey, Ben Jam." I'm like, what? I haven't heard that forever. Who's this? And it was Mike, who I had worked with at Gibbs & Cox. And he was actually, I didn't know this, he was working for the same company as my wife, actually. So you never know who you're going to run into. The picture I put here is a bridge burning. So don't burn any bridges, right? Keep those contacts, make as many relationships and development as many relationships as you can during your internship, because you never know how it's going to help you or how you're going to be able to help somebody else down the road. Number 3, especially while you're early in your career, pursue the experience now and focus on getting the money later. And I know that's especially with this, some of us may have heavy student loan debt. It's not cheap to go to university these days. After going to school for 4 years, you're just like, "Hey, Ben, I just want to get money and I just want to have a good time now. Like, I've been busting my butt. You're telling me not to make that money, but I really think it's more important to gain the experience, because when you have the experience, the money will come later." I think I made this mistake a little bit, maybe you could say, in hindsight, that my first job, I wanted to go to the oil and gas industry, right? Back in 2013, oil and gas was, gas was $100 a barrel. The salaries were high. Everything was great. But when I got there, unfortunately, it was kind of just the beginning of the, let's say, oil price crash, right? And there just wasn't a lot of work going on, unfortunately. And I looked around and they were hiring master's degree students and they were hiring PhD students. And I realized, like, man, if work comes, I'm not going to be the first one to receive it. I'm kind of at the bottom of the totem pole here, which is exactly why I went to Foreship in the first place. I said I wanted to get experience, and it's paid off for me more than I could probably tell you. So what this arrow is showing here is actually a conversation I had with, let's say, a mutual friend of mine who has done very well for himself. He's a millionaire. He started multiple businesses. He's a amateur Porsche national race champion. He's one of these good at everything types of people. And over a beer, he told me that, hey, this is how I would recommend you pursue or look at your career. From the age of 20 to 25, just make as many mistakes as you can. Mess up as much as possible. Don't worry about too much what you're doing. Just go try things, mess up, see what you're good at, see what you're not good at. By the time you're 25 and 30, maybe you can start figuring out what you like. When you get to 30, say, all right, I found a couple things that I like. Let me start heading in that direction. Let me think about how I can position myself maybe to start taking that next step. By the time you're 35 and 40, that's when you start positioning yourself to really achieve your career goals. So by the time that you reach your 40s, you've positioned yourself and obtained a role where now, hey, if I do good at this role, if I can keep performing, then I'm going to have the opportunity to really achieve what I want. And when he laid this out for me, I was like, man, I don't really have to start worrying too much about this until I'm in my 40s. Is that what you're saying? But it kind of took a lot of, let's say, it felt like a weight lifted off of my shoulders in a sense, right? So again, pursue the experience, and especially when you're young, early in your career, internships, first job or two, try different things, make as many mistakes as possible, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to find what you want to do later on. Any questions or any comments so far?
That kind of took a weight off my mind as well. It can feel like we need to specialize right away, even when you're still in college. And yeah, it's good to hear that, no, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, I think some people certainly decide earlier that they want, and that's great. But for me, that wasn't the case. And I don't think it necessarily has to be the case for everybody.
Especially in this field, because there's just so much and it's all so interesting.
I would say you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't even know the opportunities that are out there. So the only way to find that out is really to put yourself out there and go exploring, really.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I have another question, kind of relating to the slide before this one. If you could go back really quickly.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so you said not to start heading to focus until like 30 or 35. So I guess I just kind of wanted to know, how would you recommend us navigating in interviews and internship conversations when they ask you like what you're interested in? Should we be open and honest about the fact that we're just interested in kind of everything right now? Or should we kind of navigate towards what they're more suited to what they're working in and try to get that internship there?
Yeah, I think I would do it one of two ways. Pick the things that you enjoyed most in class. Like if you really, like I really enjoyed thermodynamics, and I didn't end up doing anything with that, but that was something that I really enjoyed. So focus on the classes that you're good at and that kind of you gravitated towards, and or based on what the company is offering, of course, they're going to want to hear that you're interested in that specific industry or specific role that they're asking. But I don't think, let's say, if I'm interviewing somebody in their early 20s, I'm not expecting them to come tell me what their career goals are, and nor am I expecting them to really know that at that point.
Right. That makes sense. Kind of like a mix of both. Things that you're interested in, and then also I'm also open to learning more things as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's keep going. Actually, this is kind of a nice segue based on what we just said, right? I think it's very important to adopt an inquisitive mind and focus on always learning, right? I put a quote here from Henry Ford because I think that probably carries more weight than anything I could say. But especially in today's business, things are moving so fast. I mean, there's new computer programs, there's new technologies, there's so much innovation going on that if you ever settle, you're going to get left behind. So I think it's important to always have this inquisitive mind. You're always trying to learn something, always trying to figure out something new, and never settling, always understanding that there's so much more to learn. I think that's an extremely valuable tool to carry with you through your career, especially when you're young. Number 5. What I recommend is when you're younger, earlier in your career, take every opportunity that's presented to you. Just say yes to everything. If they say, hey, Ben, we need to go, I know we're a naval architecture firm, but we need to go, somebody needs to cover the chicken farm in Timbuktu that we have for a month. Just say yes, no matter what it is. I have a story of a friend who works for Chrysler right now, and he's a mechanical engineer by degree. And we were talking a few years back, and he said, hey, I have this opportunity to become an electrical engineering project manager and be involved with some of the like AI development for some of Chrysler's vehicles, like lane assist or automated driving. It's like, but I don't know anything about electrical engineering, and maybe some of you can relate. So, but we talked about it, and we're like, just take it, man. If they're offering it to you, just say yes. And he didn't know anything about electrical engineering, adopted the same sort of mindset that we just talked about before, tried to learn up as much as he can, soak it in, and he's still in that role now. And I'm certain that his role as a project manager, and he was early in his career. I mean, he had only been with Chrysler for 2 years, had the opportunity to move up to be a PM for the automated driving technologies. And you better believe that's going to pay off for him when he's done with his current project. So I think if you can say yes and you can take an opportunity when you're younger and early on in your career, do it. Once you become established, then you kind of gain the leverage and you gain the, let's say, credibility to decide whether it's the right thing for you or not. But when you're younger, early in your career, take every opportunity that you can. Number 6, as you're going through your internships, you're going to see things happening in the office, right? You're going to maybe see some stressful situations where people need to make a hard decision, or maybe you'll see some personality, HR type of issues, these types of things. Constantly be asking yourself, how would you have handled this situation if you were in your superior's shoes or somebody else's shoes? Oftentimes, or I'd say most of the time, you're not going to have all the information available to you that the actual decision maker had, right? But I think it's nice to play this game because maybe you will be in that position someday, and you'll remember how it was handled before, and you'll be able to learn from that and use that later on when maybe you have to make a similar or same decision. Number 7, ask for feedback early and often. So what I've showed here is when you learn about project management, you may learn about this agile feedback loop. And this is typically used in software development or programming. And the idea is that as you're rolling out a new software, you want to be able to push it out and get feedback as soon as possible so that you can move to the next iteration, right? The shorter that you can make that feedback loop, the closer that you can get your program to the final end product. If it takes a long time just to get any feedback, then you're going to drag out the delivery time of the product. So I think this is a nice way to think about your personal development, professional development as well. In regular companies, you do like a yearly evaluation. And so I don't think it's wise to wait for, the one time a year to ask your boss how you're doing. And internships are even shorter, right? It's 3 months, and those 3 months go by so fast. So you don't want to wait 2 months into the internship to find out if your boss thinks you're doing a good job or not. So especially during internships, I would recommend after the first few weeks, go ahead and ask your boss, hey, am I doing what you expect me to do? Do you have any feedback on things I can improve on? How do you think I'm doing? And try to get that feedback as quickly as possible so that you can adjust yourself and reiterate yourself to get to the point where you need to be, or where the company needs you to be, or where your team is expecting you to be. And carry that over in your professional lives as well. And number 8, you have the opportunity to reshape how we're doing business, if anybody does, right? And this is true more than ever, especially with all of this COVID pandemic and working remotely. Businesses are exploring how they can do business differently given the circumstances so that we don't run into this issue again, right? And those people making the decisions, let's say, might not be as savvy with video conferencing as you are, for example. So one thing you hear let's call it a narrative, maybe, that the times are hardest for our millennial generation, or the Gen X generation, and COVID's just another challenge, and we're constant with high student debt and COVID. And if you want to look at it like that, go ahead, but I choose not to. I think that I look at it as more of a let's say opportunistic perspective, that with more challenge comes more opportunity, and we can sit back and we can, let's say, let all of these things happen to us and complain about it, or we can be the game changers and help shape the new way that we do business. So I highlighted an article here. It says the COVID pandemic has accelerated digital transformation at 59% of the organizations that they surveyed in this study. I can tell you at my last position, it was a little bit of an old school mentality as far as, if you're not at work turning the hammer, or banging the hammer, turning the wrench, then you're not actually getting work done, is basically kind of how the attitude was. And it was a manufacturing facility, right? Kind of like a shipyard attitude. And remote work, I was starting to let my guys do it because I was familiar with how productive it could be, but it was not encouraged, let's say. But guess what? Within a span of a week, we started talking about, hey, this COVID thing might affect us. Let's start preparing how we're going to work from home. And we had a week to do that, because by Thursday of that week, they said, everybody's working from home starting Monday, get your teams remote. So we went from having 0 remote capability to my team learning how to do it 100% within a week. I was very proud of how they did that, but that just goes to show you how quickly things can change, and how if we would have adopted that mindset earlier, maybe it would have been a little bit easier to transition. So as I mentioned before, I think I'm expecting a rebound away from some of this hybrid work environment towards more in-person engagement, maybe a couple of years from now. And it's going to be really interesting to see, businesses can save a lot of money not having office space and having folks work from home. So that's a serious consideration that a lot of them are making right now. But talking to some of my friends who have taken remote jobs, they say, yeah, it's nice, but I'm not going to want to do this long term. I'm going to want to get back into a place where I can see my colleagues every once in a while. So sort of looping back to what the first point we talked about is that's certainly something you should be considering as you're going through your internship opportunities and your new job opportunities. But it's something that we as the generation coming into the business world have the opportunity to define and really shape the way that businesses work in the future. So that is what I have for you today. I want to open it up and see what sort of questions you have, and if you have any feedback to offer. Don't be shy.
I had a question.
Yes.
So it was previously mentioned that you worked on several projects internationally,
Yes.
and I was wondering if there was something you wish you knew before working in a different country.
That's a good question. Well, I would certainly encourage anybody to, if you have the opportunity to work in a different country that you're not familiar with, to do that, because each country has their own, let's say, culture and ways of doing things. And they can be eye-opening and they can be frustrating sometimes if you're not, let's say, prepared. My experience in Brazil, let's say, with the pace of work was not at all the same as my experience in Germany with their, let's say, ways of doing things. So the best recommendation I can make is walk in it with an open mind, especially if you're in somebody else's country. Recognize that you're a guest there. Treat it as if you're a guest in somebody else's house. Recognize that there's different way of doing things. They might be better or they might be worse than the way you do things now. But having that, let's say, respect and appreciation is very valuable, because especially in a place like Miami, where or on these dry docks, it's like the United Nations when we go on these projects, right? People from all over the place. And that's one of the great things about working for Foreship, especially. You meet just such wonderful people from all over the place. But the more you are exposed to different cultures, the say, better you'll be able to manage those relationships and those types of projects.
Thank you.
I have another question, kind of related to some information earlier in the presentation.
Yes.
You mentioned something about the company being. You mentioned a lot about the company being interested in electrification of ships and just kind of moving towards that. I also wondered if you were interested at all in using LNG fuel to lower emissions. I know that can be used to do the same thing, so I was wondering if there was any interest there.
Yes, very much so. The cruise lines are just now launching their first versions of LNG cruise ships. So Carnival just released the Mardi Gras, or just launched Mardi Gras from Turku, Finland in December 17th, I believe. And for example, Disney Cruise Line launches the Triton class, which is an LNG vessel. We had a lot of contribution in the new build development of that ship. And so, yes, the answer to your question is some of the cruise lines have already built ships to operate off of LNG. The challenge with LNG is that the fuel is, let's say, a lot less energy dense than standard fuel. So it takes up a lot of space to store these. The fuel tanks take up a lot of space than maybe standard fuel tanks may. And in the US, in maybe like intercoastal waterways, the infrastructure is not there to provide for LNG yet. But there's a couple, think about it like Tesla, right? When everybody was talking about Tesla 10 years ago, the comment was, yeah, it'd be cool to have an electric car, but where are you going to charge it? Well, Tesla invested in developing the infrastructure, so that's not a problem anymore. Same thing with alternative fuels. LNG is not quite there. And so, for example, Disney's having to modify their port in Port Canaveral just so they can bunker LNG. But one solution to that is possibly offering a, let's call it like a containerized solution where it's a plug and play, right? So you can do this for LNG, or you could do this for batteries, or you could do this for any sort of alternative fuel. Methanol is another one that's being considered, where you could, anywhere that a semi truck could get, you could carry these containerized sizes of everything's internal stored, like batteries, whatever it is, drop it on the deck, plug it in, and there's your power source. So these types of discussions are ongoing, and it's really exciting because nobody has the answer quite yet. So the short answer to your question is yes, LNG is considered and being used, but is that going to be the best solution? I don't know. We'll see.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the good question. What else?
I have a general question on just internships.
Okay.
So had you not had, like, say you had no internships while you're in college, like how much do you think the internships prepared you when you first entered the workforce? Like, did it get you familiar in ways that you wouldn't have otherwise?
100%. Yeah, I think so. Just from the very basic, in the very basic sense of just working in a corporate environment, and not, in college you can wear sweatpants and sweatshirts to class every day if you want, and there's certain things in corporate environment that's just, you wouldn't know it until you sat in it, kind of like the show The Office, right? So you learn how to operate in a professional setting at the very least, and then on top of that, any of the technical skills that you pick up and gather along the way may be useful. And I mean, at this company and at my last company, when I was hiring, we looked for students that had internship experience in our field, right? So at my last job, we were looking for people that had experience in the defense industry, and that's a huge plus to even just get your foot in the door.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. What else?
Hey, Ben, I got a question for you.
Yes, Warren.
Typically, what do you look for when you hire an intern?
Oh, good question. We look for an intern. So if you have past internship experience, that's great, because the same reason that I'm encouraging you to get various internships, if we've seen somebody that's had various internships before us, that's great, because they're able to bring to the table everything that they learned from other companies, right? At Foreship, we're looking for, let's say, self-starters, right? Somebody who we can give a task and can trust that they're going to do the best job they can on it, and we don't have to be looking over their shoulder watching them the whole time. Like I mentioned before, we've been working remotely for a long time now, and oftentimes people are in different countries, right? So we can't be, if I wanted to be even, I wouldn't be able to look over the shoulders of my guys the whole time. And so we need to trust that you're self-starter, you're responsible, and you're going to get the job done on your own. And if you need help, you'll reach out to us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Warren.
I guess I had a kind of a piggyback question off of that. And so with the University of Michigan specifically going to kind of like a pass-fail option for COVID this past year, what is your, what's kind of like the industry point of view of that, and how would that affect an applicant and their standing?
Yeah, how do you mean, like if somebody's had COVID or not, how would they be able to come do an internship?
Well, so the university has loosened pass-fail restrictions so that to account for the adjustment to online learning and whatnot, that they're encouraging students to utilize that option more. And
okay.
so, yeah.
I think what Ethan's trying to say, if I may, is if you have an applicant and you see a transcript and you see a bunch of passes instead of grades, what are you going to say to yourself? And this happened for winter 20 and fall 21, and it's going to happen for winter 21 as well.
Yeah. I didn't know that, so that's nice to know at least. But given the circumstances of the last year, that wouldn't change how we look at an applicant. I think we have to understand the circumstances, and it's been tough, and we've had to do the same thing in business, right? Like, we're constantly adjusting every day to delays and things. So as far as how we're going to review a candidate, I don't think that would really change much. Of course, if we see something that says all A's, that's great, right? But I don't think it would hurt you to see anything otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of your professional experience, I'm just kind of wondering, where would you say the balance between the classes, what you've learned like formally in school, and then internships, and then maybe just kind of on the fly once you made it professionally? Like, I mean, obviously I'm going to still try to get a degree from the department regardless of what you say, but I'm just kind of interested in terms of, I don't know, a rough breakdown of what you use on a regular basis, where it came from. Does that make sense?
I need to be careful what I say, because everybody's going to drop out after this. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that question makes great sense. So I'll speak from my perspective. I never had it in a very strictly technical position, right? So for somebody that wants to be a stability expert, right, they're going to carry a lot more of the specifics about stability with them. But what I think I learned at the University of Michigan is how to solve problems. That's really what you're learning. You're learning how to learn, and you're learning how to solve problems. And of course, this is going to be a biased comment, but you can tell the difference between a Michigan grad and some other schools sometimes. The way that they are able to approach a problem and dissect it. So is it that I remember every single thing that from thermodynamics or hydrodynamics 1 and the Bernoulli equation? No. But having gone through that, you learn how to dissect the problem and how to approach problem solving, which I think is the most valuable thing that you get from a degree like the University of Michigan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Thanks so much.
I have a piggyback question off of your comment.
Sure.
So I feel like kind of what you said is starting to kick in for me. Me being in my like junior year, I feel like I'm starting to understand that it's not so much about like the equations and stuff. It's more about like how you approach the problem, how you go through the process, how to think about it.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, when do you think it kicked in for you as you were going through college or as you were going through your career? Like, that was the point of it, to really learn how to learn and not so much the specifics of everything, even though we go to these classes that teach us specifics.
Yeah, my junior year, same. I wasn't a great student my freshman and sophomore year. And it's not because I was necessarily distracted. It was just that I hadn't figured out what worked for me yet. And junior year is when it kicked in. And I think maybe after the fact is when I realized that, okay, memorizing everything isn't the important thing, but the faster that you can absorb the information and the faster you can learn just in general, that's where the value is.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's just important to, kind of speak it into the air. I'm also kind of wondering, like, maybe if it's important for maybe us as juniors and seniors to maybe mentor that down to our sophomores and freshmen. Let them know, like, hey, as you're going through these things, these harder classes as well, even online, especially, it's not so much about learning every specific. So yeah, thank you. That was a great comment.
Yeah.
It really spoke to me.
Good. What else do you guys got? These are great. These are really good questions. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, I'll share this with Warren. So Warren, you can distribute this presentation if you want. My contact information's here.
Thanks, Ben. Will do.
Yeah, if you have any questions after the fact or something maybe you think of after this that you wanted to ask me, my email will be there. My phone number's there. You can shoot me a text or send me an email, and I'd be happy to spend some time answering your questions afterwards. But maybe end on a little word of encouragement. I know, I feel for you guys. I can't imagine how challenging it is to be in one of the more fun times of your life at university, having to go through this remotely and kind of deal with the things that we're dealing with at the moment. But and especially with a challenging course load like junior year, maybe. But a degree from Michigan carries a lot of weight, guys, and it's something that you can look back on and be proud of once you've achieved it. And I think that, like I said before, your group, your generation has the opportunity to kind of reshape how we do business in the future. And you're going to have taken away more lessons learned from all of this than maybe you realize right now. So hang in there. I think the light's at the end of the tunnel. It's getting better, and there's greener pastures ahead.